La Sabaneta Prison, where inmates ruled and chaos reigned. Like, comment, and subscribe, unless you're afraid of the dark corners of the world we're about to step into. The night was thick with humidity when officers found the abandoned sedan stalled beneath a broken street lamp on the outskirts of Maracaibo. The windows were shattered, the engine still warm, and on the passenger seat lay a leather notebook stuffed with codes, names, and numbers. To the investigators, it didn't look like a robbery or escape attempt. It looked like someone had walked away without turning back. Detective Andrea Salazar ran her gloved fingers across the notebook's cracked spine. She had seen countless crime scenes, but this one felt different. It carried the kind of silence that comes before an explosion. The license plate traced back to a man named Rafael El Toro Zambrano, a mid-level street hustler who vanished 2 days earlier after a police sweep targeting a local smuggling ring. But Rafael alone wasn't enough to explain what she found next. Inside the trunk lay a single item, a visitor pass from La Sabaneta Prison, one of the most infamous correctional facilities in the Western Hemisphere. A place whispered about more than described. A place where the guards controlled the gates, but the inmates controlled everything else. Salazar exhaled slowly. People didn't disappear around La Sabaneta by accident. They disappeared because someone inside wanted them to. 2 weeks earlier, before Rafael vanished, another investigation had quietly begun. A series of coded messages intercepted by border agents suggested that someone inside La Sabaneta was pulling strings far beyond its walls, coordinating money drops, approving deals, and authorizing decisions with the authority of a kingpin. The messages were signed with one unmistakable alias, El Arquitecto. The Architect, a name that had circulated for years but never belonged to a confirmed identity. Rumors claimed El Arquitecto had once been a university student studying engineering before drifting into the underworld. Others said he was a former accountant who'd manipulated numbers so well he built an empire from the shadows. But the most unsettling rumor was that he was already serving time, not outside, but inside La Sabaneta, ruling from within a system that had collapsed under overcrowding, corruption, and chaos. Detective Salazar was beginning to suspect that Rafael had stumbled onto something bigger than street-level smuggling, something that connected him directly to the man whose name appeared in every rumor, and yet in no official record. Back at the station, the notebook revealed more than expected. Among the coded entries, Salazar found a repeated symbol, a triangle with a line carved through the center. It appeared beside names, locations, and dates, including one date scheduled for the following day, marked with a double underline. A transfer was set for that morning. A high-risk inmate. Destination, La Sabaneta. The prisoner's name was Mateo Aranda, once known on the streets as El Mago, the magician, not for illusions, but for disappearing from police investigations without a trace. He had a reputation for slipping out of situations the way smoke slips through fingers. But this time, luck had run out. He had been caught in a sting and sentenced to 12 years. What made Mateo dangerous wasn't the crimes attributed to him. It was the fact that he had once worked directly under a man authorities believed could be El Arquitecto. Salazar didn't believe in coincidences. She pushed for a delay, even a moment, to reevaluate the transfer. But regulation was regulation, and La Sabaneta rarely waited for permission. The next morning, Mateo was shackled, escorted, and placed inside a reinforced transport van with tinted windows and a rusting body. 2 guards sat in the front. One more watched him from the back. Mateo didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't ask where he was going. He simply rested his head against the metal wall and breathed slowly, as if preparing for something he already knew was coming. 20 minutes into the drive, something went wrong. The van slowed, then jerked. The radio crackled with static. The guards exchanged confused looks just before the vehicle hissed and drifted to the shoulder of the road. The driver tried the ignition twice. Nothing. As protocol dictated, the guards reported the stall. But while they made their call, Mateo leaned forward, eyes locked on the blurred blue lights of the city ahead. "Do you know where you're sending me?" he asked. The guard closest to him didn't answer. Mateo smiled, not cold, not threatening, but with the calm resolve of a man who understood invisible structures better than anyone else. "You think I'm safer there than out here. You're wrong." The guard frowned. "What are you talking about?" Mateo tilted his head. "You're delivering me back into the hands of the man I betrayed." Before the guard could respond, a second vehicle pulled up behind them. A black SUV. Windows tinted. Too quiet. Too precise. Salazar, monitoring updates from the station, felt her pulse spike when she heard the partial transmission cut out. Someone else knew about the transfer. Someone who shouldn't. By the time Salazar reached the roadside, the SUV was gone. The van doors were open. The guards were safe but shaken, insisting they had blacked out for a brief moment. Mateo Aranda was gone. No footprints. No drag marks. No signs of struggle. He had vanished as if lifted out of the scene. But an object remained on the floor of the van, a small metal emblem shaped like a triangle with a line carved through the center. The same symbol from Raphael's notebook. And below it, scratched into the floor, were 3 words. "He's waiting inside." Salazar stared at the message, cold spreading through her chest. Who was waiting? And why did Mateo willingly go to him? One thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. Whoever El Arquitecto was, his reach extended far beyond prison walls. The man behind the walls. Detective Andrea Salazar didn't sleep that night. She remained in her office, staring at the evidence board illuminated by a single flickering desk lamp. Mateo Aranda was gone. Rafael Zambrano had vanished. And every clue pointed to one place. La Sabaneta Prison, the same institution that had earned a reputation for being less a correctional facility and more a simmering ecosystem where influence meant survival, and survival meant power. But Salazar wasn't thinking about rumors. She was thinking about the emblem found in the van, the same triangle and line symbol etched into the metal, beside Mateo's last message. "He's waiting inside. Not you. Not they. He. The architect." The next morning, Salazar received a call from the regional corrections director. They needed her at La Sabaneta immediately. A disturbance had erupted overnight, and authorities suspected it was connected to the escape or abduction of Mateo Aranda. As she drove, the landscape hardened. Dusty roads, crumbling walls, watchtowers arching over razor wire that glimmered under the rising sun. When she finally reached the front gates, she stepped out into an atmosphere that felt thick enough to chew. La Sabaneta wasn't quiet, it was listening. Guards escorted her through dim corridors where fluorescent lights flickered and echoed footfalls bounced unpredictably. The deeper she walked, the more she sensed that she wasn't just being led somewhere. She was being allowed to enter. The deputy warden, a thin man named Cardenas with tired eyes and a taut jaw, met her at a steel door leading to the central yard. "We've had complications," he said. "Room inspections, contraband sweeps, a few inmate confrontations." "That's nothing new here," Salazar replied. He exhaled. They were waiting for him. Mateo. Word spread before we even knew he escaped. "How?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed open the steel door. The yard beyond was vast and unsettlingly still. Hundreds of inmates stood in clusters like small kingdoms, each one controlled by its own leader. Some played cards. Some carved wood. Others simply watched, all of them observing Salazar with a silence that crawled under her skin. Cardenas gestured toward a staircase leading to an upper walkway. "We've identified something you'll want to see." Up the stairs, they entered an office that hadn't been used in years. Dust-coated old filing cabinets. The windows were cracked and rust stained the metal frames. Inside, graffiti covered the walls, names, markings, numbers. But one symbol appeared repeatedly, the triangle and line, and beneath it, phrases carved into the plaster. "Las sombras siguen órdenes." The shadows follow orders. "La voz está dentro." The voice is inside. And one more. "Aranda es la lave." Aranda is the key. Salazar stepped back, piecing together the implications. Someone had been coordinating from within the prison for years, not with brute force, but with quiet control. And if inmates believed Mateo was the key, then Mateo wasn't hiding. He was heading straight toward someone. Or something. As Salazar studied the room, a guard burst in, chest heaving. "Detective, you need to come to D block. Now." The urgency in his voice snapped them into motion. They raced down 2 levels, passing cells that hummed with whispers. When they reached D block, the hallway was crowded with guards struggling to hold back inmates, trying to glimpse something. Then Salazar saw it. On the floor of a dim corridor lay a man, unconscious but alive. His wrists were tied loosely with torn fabric, his clothes stained with dirt, and his breathing shallow. It was Rafael Zambrano. Salazar knelt beside him. "Rafael, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. For a moment he looked lost, not physically, but mentally, as if he'd been somewhere most people didn't survive. "He took me," Rafael whispered. "Who?" "Mateo," she asked. Rafael shook his head slowly. "No. Mateo took me to him." Salazar leaned in. "To who, Rafael? Say the name." Rafael swallowed, struggling to speak. "You don't say his name here." He glanced nervously at the prisoners watching through the bars. "He has ears everywhere, even when you think you're alone." "Is it El Arquitecto?" Salazar whispered. Rafael froze. Even the guards nearby stiffened. Rafael's voice cracked. "He's not just a man. He's a system inside the system." Salazar frowned. "Where is Mateo now?" Rafael's lip trembled. He walked into the lower yard. They let him pass. Nobody stopped him. No one even looked at him. It was like they recognized him. "What do you mean?" He was expected. Salazar felt her breath hitch. Expected? By who? Rafael's chest rose and fell sharply. By the man who built this place from the inside out. The one who decides who lives, who falls, who rises. He grabbed her sleeve with trembling fingers. "You don't understand, detective. Mateo didn't escape. He returned." The words hit her like a blow. "Return to what?" Rafael's voice dropped to a whisper barely audible over the tension in the air. "To the throne." Salazar's heart pounded. "Mateo Aranda is El Arquitecto?" Rafael shook his head weakly. "No." Then he whispered the line that changed everything. "Mateo is the successor." The corridor fell silent as the truth settled. The architect wasn't a person. He was a position, a role passed down like a crown. And Mateo Aranda had just been escorted into La Sabaneta, not as a prisoner, but as royalty. Salazar rose to her feet with a cold realization spreading across her spine. Mateo hadn't vanished. He had entered the one place where his past, his future, and his enemies converged, a world inside the world, a kingdom of shadows. And now, he was walking straight into the presence of the real architect. The silent throne. Detective Andrea Salazar had been inside prisons before. She'd interviewed suspects in concrete cells, walked past razor wire, and stared into the eyes of people who had long abandoned fear. But nothing compared to the descent into La Sabaneta's lower yard, a place guards rarely entered and administrators pretended didn't exist. She followed Cardenas down a narrow stairwell that spiraled into stale air and thick humidity. The walls, once painted white, were now gray with grime. Not a single camera was mounted here. No lights flickered overhead. It was as if this level had been sealed off intentionally. At the bottom, a reinforced gate stood open. Salazar froze. "Why is it open?" she demanded. Cardenas wiped sweat from his forehead. Because his voice cracked, someone unlocked it from the inside. Not escaped. Unlocked. Salazar stepped through the gate. Ahead lay the lower yard, a cavernous space that looked more like an abandoned factory than part of a prison. Rusted beams stretched overhead. Slivers of blue daylight filtered in through gaps in the ceiling, casting fractured shadows across the ground. And in the center of the yard, surrounded by dozens of silent inmates, stood Mateo Aranda. Alive, calm, upright. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't afraid. He was being welcomed. Salazar's heart thudded. "Mateo," she shouted. Every inmate turned their head at the exact same second, forming a synchronized wave of attention that chilled her to the bone. Mateo didn't flinch. He simply raised his chin, acknowledging her presence. Then another figure stepped forward from the crowd. An older man, tall and weathered, his beard trimmed neatly, his posture too confident for someone who had spent years behind bars. His eyes were sharp, calculating, the eyes of someone who knew every brick of this prison better than its architects. Cardenas whispered urgently, "That's him." Salazar swallowed. The architect. The man offered a faint smile. "Detective Salazar, I've heard you're persistent." "Where's your control room?" she shot back. "Your headquarters? Your operation? How are you running this?" He chuckled softly. "Why do you assume I run anything? Look around." He gestured. "Do you see chains? Guards? Locks? This is not ruled by force. It is ruled by order. An order these men built because the state failed them." Salazar stepped forward. "Mateo isn't part of your order." The architect raised a brow. "Oh, he was born into it." She stiffened. "He was a street dealer who made a mistake. That's all." "Is it?" The architect motioned subtly, and two inmates parted like curtains. Behind them, scratched into the concrete, was a symbol Salazar recognized instantly. The triangle and line. Only this one was larger, carved deep into the wall long before Mateo's arrest. "This mark predates me," the architect said. "Predates all of us." Salazar shook her head. "This isn't a legacy. It's manipulation." "No, it's structure," he replied calmly. "Up there," he pointed to the floors above them, "the prison is chaos. Down here, order is preserved. Violence is discouraged. We protect our own. We decide our future." "Future?" she asked sharply. "By abducting a man in broad daylight." "We didn't abduct him," the architect corrected. "Mateo came willingly." Salazar turned to Mateo. He finally stepped forward, his expression conflicted but steady. "Detective, there are things you never knew," he said. "My father, my brother, they weren't just inmates here. They helped build this. They tried to turn this place into something survivable, something structured. The architect was their ally." Salazar's pulse spiked. "Mateo, this man is manipulating you." Mateo shook his head. "No, he saved me, and he can save others." Salazar stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Rafael Zambrano risked his life to tell us what's happening. You remember him, don't you? He believed in you." Mateo's expression broke for the first time. Pain flickered across his face. The architect sighed. "Detective, you don't understand. Rafael was never supposed to be harmed." He panicked. "My men brought him here to calm him, not hurt him." "Then why leave him tied on a hallway floor?" she snapped. The architect's face hardened. "Because someone interfered. Someone who didn't follow my orders." Salazar's instincts kicked in. "Who?" A slow murmur spread through the crowd. The architect turned toward the inmates. "Bring him." Two men dragged forward a trembling prisoner, a young man with shaking hands and terror-filled eyes. "He acted alone," the architect said. "Fear drove him. He believed Rafael would betray us." Salazar stepped between them. "Enough. This isn't justice. This isn't order. This is fear disguised as leadership." The architect met her eyes, unblinking. "Then take him. Take Mateo too. If they want to leave, they may." The crowd gasped. Even Mateo looked stunned. Salazar narrowed her eyes. "Why let them go?" The architect clasped his hands behind his back. "Because legends are not born in cages. They're born from choices." He stepped closer. "And Mateo must choose who he wants to be, your witness or our successor." Mateo's breath hitched. His eyes darted between Salazar and the architect, between freedom and destiny. Finally, he whispered, "I want out." The architect nodded. "Then go." The crowd parted. Salazar grabbed Mateo by the wrist, guiding him toward the exit. Every step felt unreal, too easy, too quiet. But just as they reached the stairwell, a voice called from behind. "This changes nothing, detective." Salazar turned. The architect stood in the center of the yard, hands clasped peacefully, surrounded by silent loyalty. "La Sabaneta does not need a king," he said softly. It creates its own. Outside, as daylight hit Mateo's face for the first time in 2 days, he exhaled shakily. Salazar placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now." But Mateo didn't look relieved. He looked afraid. "He's right," Mateo whispered. "It doesn't end here." Salazar glanced back at the prison towers looming behind them. "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." 3 months later, as the government prepared to restructure La Sabaneta after a full-scale investigation, a message arrived at Salazar's desk. A sketch. A familiar symbol. The triangle and the line. Underneath it, handwritten in ink. "The successor will return." Salazar felt the chill ripple through her spine. The architect was no longer confined. He was rebuilding, and Mateo's story wasn't over.